The stars disappeared behind the enemy fleet. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Resolute and watched 3,000 warships block out the light of distant suns. Each ship was massive. Each ship was ancient. Each ship had never known defeat. The Dominion had arrived at horizon's edge. Around her, officers worked at their stations with trembling hands. Some whispered prayers. Others simply stared at their screens, unable to process what they were seeing. The enemy fleet stretched across space like a wall of death. Sensors counted the ships again and again, hopping for a different number. The number never changed. 3,000 warships. Humanity had 800. Admiral, her communications officer said, his voice cracking. We are receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship. Put it through. The main screen flickered. A face appeared that would haunt human nightmares for generations. Lord or Supreme Commander of the Dominion looked down at them with 4 eyes that held no mercy. His skin was dark gray, covered in patterns that glowed with a faint blue light. His mouth was too wide. His teeth were too sharp. Humans of Horizon's Edge, or said. His voice was calm, almost bored. I am Lord, or I speak for the Dominion that has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. 47 species have heard these words before you. All 47 now serve us. He paused to let the weight of that number sink in. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally. Lower your shields, power down your weapons, deliver your leaders to my ship for processing. Do this, and your species will be allowed to live as servants of the Dominion. Or leaned forward, and his 4 eyes seemed to look directly at. Refuse, and you will be erased. Your colonies will burn, your history will be forgotten, your children will never know you existed. This is not a threat. This is simply what happens to species that resist us. We have done it 47 times. We will do it again. The transmission ended. Silence filled the bridge. Every officer looked at Admiral. She was small for a human, with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was 63 years old. She had served in the fleet for 40 years. She had known this day would come. Admiral, her first officer said quietly, "What are your orders?" Looked at the enemy fleet one more time. She looked at her own ships, scattered around the colony world like toys before a giant. She thought about the 12 million civilians on Horizon's Edge. She thought about their children. She thought about the future. Then she gave an order that shocked everyone. All ships begin immediate retreat. Full evacuation of Horizon's Edge. Set course for the Obsidian Nebula. Her first officer grabbed her arm. Admiral, we cannot run. If we flee, they will think us cowards. They will hunt us like animals. Yes, said softly, they will. She turned to face her crew. Transmit the retreat order to all ships. Begin civilian evacuation. I want every transport, every shuttle, every vessel that can carry a human being heading for the nebula in 30 minutes. But Admiral, that is an order. The bridge erupted into activity. Officers transmitted commands. Ships began to move. On the surface of Horizon's Edge, millions of people ran for evacuation points. Families grabbed what they could carry. Children cried. Parents made impossible choices about what to save and what to leave behind. The retreat was broadcast across the galaxy. Every species with a receiver watched humanity run. The enslaved races watched. Everyone watched as 800 human ships turned their backs on the enemy and fled into the darkness. On the enemy flagship, Lord laughed. Look at them, he said to his officers. They do not even try to fight. 10,000 years we have conquered, and never have I seen a species break so quickly. They are nothing. They are less than nothing. His tactical officer, a young named N, studied his screens with a small frown. Supreme Commander, they are heading for the Obsidian Nebula. Our sensors do not work well in that region. Should we intercept before they reach it? Or waved a massive hand dismissively. Why rush? Let them run into that dead zone. Let them hide among the dust and rocks like frightened animals. We will follow when we are ready. There is no honor in chasing cowards. But sir, if we let them establish a defensive position. Defensive position? Or laughed again. They have 800 ships, we have 3,000. What defense can they establish that we cannot crush? No, young one, let them run, let them feel hope. It will make their final despair all the... N nodded and said nothing more. But something bothered him, something about the way the humans retreated. It was too organized, too calm. Ships that should have scattered in panic were instead moving in perfect formation. Civilian transports that should have been chaotic were following precise evacuation routes. It did not look like panic, it looked like a plan. But N was young, and Lord or was the greatest commander in Dominion history. Surely he knew what he was doing. The human fleet disappeared into the Obsidian Nebula. The last ship to enter was the Resolute, Admiral's flagship. As it crossed into the swirling dust clouds, it sent one final transmission that did not intercept. All ships, this is Admiral, Phase 1 complete. Proceed to assigned positions and maintain radio silence. Remember what we have trained for. Remember what we have built. Remember that we are not running. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was hard as steel. We are hunting. Deep in the nebula, 800 human ships scattered and disappeared. They moved through the dust clouds with strange confidence, following paths that should not have existed. They knew this nebula. They knew every rock, every gravity well, every shadow. They had been preparing this place for 40 years. On a hidden station called Prometheus, Chief Engineer Cole watched the fleet arrive on his screens. He was an old man now, white-haired and tired. He had spent his entire career building something that most people did not even know existed. They took the bait, he said to his team. The Dominion is coming. He looked at the map of the nebula on his wall. Red dots showed hidden weapon platforms, blue dots showed sensor relays, green dots showed drone swarms waiting to wake up. There were millions of dots. 40 years of work, Cole whispered. 40 years of patience, and now, finally, we get to show them what humans really are. In the darkness of the nebula, humanity waited. And somewhere behind them, 3,000 enemy warships began their pursuit, confident in their coming victory. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Obsidian Nebula was a place of darkness and silence. Dust clouds stretched for billions of kilometers, so thick that starlight could not pass through. Gravity wells pulled at ships without warning. Sensors became confused, showing ghosts and shadows that were not there. No species had ever tried to colonize this place. It was too dangerous, too empty. Or so the galaxy believed. Lord led his fleet into the nebula 3 days after the human retreat. His ships moved in standard conquest formation, spread wide to cover maximum area. 3,000 warships hunting 800. It should have been simple. Report, or commanded from his throne on the eternal throne. His sensor officer looked at his screens with frustration. Supreme Commander, our instruments are unreliable. The dust interferes with everything. We are following the human engine signatures, but they are faint and scattered. Then follow them slowly. We have time. N stood at his station, watching data scroll across his screens. He had been assigned to track fleet positions, a boring job for a junior officer. But as the hours passed, he began to notice something strange. Ships were disappearing from his display. Not many, just one here, 2 there. In a fleet of 3,000, it was easy to miss. N assumed it was sensor error at first. The nebula was playing tricks on their instruments, but he kept count anyway because that was his job. By the end of the first day, 17 ships had vanished. Sir, N said to his immediate commander, I am showing 17 vessels missing from formation. His commander barely looked up. Sensor ghosts, the nebula is confusing our equipment. But sir, these are not appearing and disappearing. They simply vanish and never return. Should we not investigate? With what? Our long-range sensors cannot see anything in this dust. Those ships probably just fell behind. They will catch up. They did not catch up. By the end of the second day, 53 ships were gone. N reported it again. His commander told him to stop worrying. Lord was informed that the fleet was experiencing minor communication difficulties due to nebula interference. N did not sleep that night. He studied the pattern of disappearances on his screen. The missing ships were not random. They were all on the edges of the formation. They were all isolated from their nearest neighbors. They were all in positions where no one would see them vanish. Someone was hunting them. On the third day, N broke protocol and went to the bridge. Supreme Commander, he said, bowing low before Or's throne, I must speak. Or looked down at him with irritation. Who are you? Junior Tactical Officer N, Supreme Commander. I track fleet positions, and I must report that we have lost over 100 ships since entering the nebula. The bridge went quiet. Officers turned to stare, Or's 4 eyes narrowed. 100 ships, that is impossible. We have encountered no enemy. That is exactly my concern, Supreme Commander. We have seen no enemy, we have fought no battles, yet our ships disappear one by one, always from positions where they cannot be observed. This is not accident, this is design. Or stood slowly. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, and his presence filled the bridge like a storm cloud. You are saying the humans are attacking us, these cowards who ran without firing a shot. I am saying someone is attacking us, Supreme Commander, and they know exactly where our ships are. Far away, in a hidden chamber carved into an asteroid, Chief Engineer Cole watched the fleet on his displays. Beside him, Admiral studied the same images. They are starting to notice, Cole said. The young officer has figured it out. Nodded, 112 ships eliminated, all without a single shot being fired. Your infiltrator drones are performing beyond expectations. Cole allowed himself a small smile. The infiltrator drones were his proudest creation, microscopic machines so small they were invisible to any sensor. They attached to enemy ships during close passes and slowly, quietly disabled critical systems. Life support, navigation, engine containment. The crews never knew what was happening until it was too late. The drones are only the beginning, Cole said. Wait until they reach the engagement zone. How much longer? Cole checked his calculations. At their current speed, 18 hours, they have been following our false beacons perfectly. They think they are chasing your fleet. And they have no idea they are walking into a box. A box with no exit. Back on the eternal throne, Lord or refused to believe N's warning, the Dominion had never been hunted. They were the hunters. They were the conquerors. The very idea that a species of cowards could threaten them was impossible. You are young and frightened, or told N. The nebula is playing tricks on your mind. Return to your station and speak of this no more. But Supreme Commander, that is an order. N returned to his station. He watched another ship vanish from his display, then another, then another. Each disappearance was silent, each disappearance was final, and no one but him seemed to care. He began to understand something terrible. The Dominion had conquered 47 species not because they were truly superior, but because they had never faced a species that fought back intelligently. They had won every war by being bigger, stronger, more numerous. They had never fought an enemy that was smarter. And now they were deep inside that enemy's territory, following paths that enemy had prepared, being led exactly where that enemy wanted them. At hour 16, Lord finally ordered a full stop. The disappearances had become impossible to ignore. Over 200 ships were simply gone. Officers were panicking. Rumors spread through the fleet. Find me those humans, or roared. I want their location now. His sensor officers worked frantically. They boosted power to their instruments. They tried every frequency, every method, every trick they knew. And then, all at once, the navigational beacons they had been following went dark. Every single one, simultaneously. The bridge fell into shocked silence. Without the beacons, they had no idea where they were. Without sensors, they could not find their way out. 3,000 warships of the mighty Dominion were lost in the darkness. Supreme Commander, the sensor officer whispered, we have been led here, this was all planned. Or stared at the empty screen where the beacons had been. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he did not recognize. Fear. On the Resolute, Admiral watched the enemy fleet stop moving. She smiled, but there was no joy in it, only cold satisfaction. They understand now, she said quietly. They finally understand. She opened a channel to her fleet, hidden throughout the nebula in positions they had prepared for decades. All ships, this is Admiral. The enemy has entered the engagement zone. Phase 2 is complete. She paused and took a breath. Begin Phase 3. Show them what humans can do. Throughout the Obsidian Nebula, 800 ships powered up their weapons. Millions of dormant platforms activated. Billions of drones woke from their long sleep. The trap was closing. Admiral's voice echoed through every speaker on every ship. You asked for our surrender. Here is our answer. The nebula exploded into light. What the Dominion had believed was empty dust revealed itself as something else entirely. Billions of tiny weapons platforms, hidden among the particles for decades, activated at once. They were small, each one barely the size of a human fist, But there were billions of them, and they worked together like a single terrible mind. The first wave struck the outer edge of the formation. Ships that had survived the journey suddenly found themselves surrounded by swarms of machines too small to track. These drones did not carry weapons. They carried something worse. They attached to ship hulls and began to eat. Microscopic teeth designed to chew through the strongest armor. Within minutes, hull breaches appeared. Air rushed out. Crews died screaming. Lord or watched his display in horror as red warning lights spread across his fleet like a disease. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Where is this attack coming from?" "Everywhere, Supreme Commander," his tactical officer shouted. "The attack is coming from everywhere. The dust itself is a weapon." And then the human ships appeared. They emerged from hiding places that should have been impossible. They rose from asteroid fields that sensors had shown as empty. They dropped from dust clouds that had looked like nothing but cosmic debris. 800 ships, but they were not the same ships that had fled 3 days ago. These ships had been modified for this exact battlefield. Their hulls were coated with materials that absorbed sensor waves. Their engines ran cold, invisible to thermal detection, and their weapons had been designed specifically to exploit weaknesses. The Dominion had one great advantage over most species. Their bodies could sense electromagnetic fields directly, like a sixth sense. It made them excellent warriors. It made them nearly impossible to ambush. No enemy could hide from senses. The humans had spent 40 years figuring out how to turn that advantage into a death sentence. Every human ship carried electronic warfare systems of incredible power. When they activated, they did not try to hide from senses. Instead, they overwhelmed them. They flooded the electromagnetic spectrum with noise, with false signals, with patterns designed to cause pain. Throughout the Dominion fleet, soldiers grabbed their heads and screamed. Their special sense, their great gift, had become an instrument of torture. They could not think, they could not fight, they could barely stand. And while they suffered, the human weapons fired. N was thrown across his bridge when the first missile struck his ship. He hit the wall hard, feeling ribs crack. Around him, officers lay on the floor, clutching their heads, crying out in languages he did not understand. The electronic attack had driven most of them temporarily insane. He forced himself to stand. His own head was pounding, but he was young and strong. He could still function. Through the viewport, he saw something he would never forget. A dreadnought, 5 kilometers of ancient warship that had conquered a dozen worlds, was breaking apart. Human ships surrounded it like wolves around a wounded animal. Their weapons fired in perfect coordination, striking the same spots again and again until armor failed and reactors breached. The dreadnought exploded. The light was blinding. N turned away and ran for the escape pods. He was not a coward, but he was also not a fool. This battle was already over. The only question was how many would die before it ended. On the Resolute, Admiral conducted the battle like a musician conducting a symphony. Her hands moved across holographic displays, directing ships, coordinating attacks, exploiting weaknesses. She had studied the Dominion for 40 years. She knew their tactics better than they knew themselves. Squadron 7, target the carrier on grid reference 449. Squadron 12, intercept those cruisers trying to flee. Mining teams, activate the gravity traps in Sector 8. The gravity traps were another surprise. Hidden generators that created sudden wells of intense gravity. Ships trying to escape found themselves pulled off course, slowed down, made easy targets. There was no safe direction to run. "Admiral," her sensor officer reported, "enemy ships are attempting to activate their jump drives. They want to flee the nebula." Nodded, "They will find that difficult." During the 3-day pursuit, infiltrator drones had attached to nearly every ship. Now those drones activated their secondary purpose. They found the jump drive systems and destroyed them. One by one, across the entire enemy fleet, escape became impossible. The Dominion was trapped in a cage of their enemies' making. Lord or stood on his burning bridge and watched his empire die. Fires spread across the eternal throne. Officers lay dead at their stations. The screens showed only destruction, only death, only defeat. He had commanded fleets for 300 years. He had never lost a battle. He had never even imagined losing a battle. The Dominion did not lose. The Dominion conquered. That was the natural order of things. But the natural order had changed. "How," he whispered to the smoke and flames around him. How did they do this? The answer came from everywhere and nowhere. From the ships that had seemed to flee but were actually positioning. From the weapons hidden in dust that had seemed empty. From decades of patience and planning and preparation. The humans had not been afraid, they had been waiting. In his escape pod, N drifted through the debris field that had once been a fleet. He saw the bodies of friends floating in the void. He saw ships that had served the Dominion for centuries reduced to twisted metal. He saw the end of everything he had believed. And through his tiny viewport, he watched a human destroyer cruise past. It was small compared to ships. Its weapons were less powerful. Its armor was thinner. But it was here, alive and fighting, while the mighty Dominion burned around it. A human face appeared briefly in one of the destroyer's viewports. A young woman, probably a junior officer. She looked out at the destruction with no expression that N could read. Then she turned away and returned to her duties. She was not gloating, she was not celebrating, she was simply doing her job. That, N realized, was the most terrifying thing of all. The humans had not done this out of hatred or anger or desire for revenge. They had done it because it was necessary, because it was efficient, because it was the logical solution to the problem of the Dominion. They had turned genocide into mathematics. The battle lasted 6 more hours. When it ended, fewer than 200 ships remained from the original 3,000. Most of those were too damaged to fight. Lord Or's flagship was captured, not destroyed. Admiral wanted him alive. She stood on the bridge of the Resolute as the final reports came in. Her officers were exhausted but triumphant. They had won the most important battle in human history. They had defeated an enemy that had never been defeated. But was not celebrating. She was already thinking about what came next. "Begin recording," she ordered. "I want every moment of this battle documented, every tactic, every victory, every Dominion ship that died." "Why, Admiral?" her first officer asked. Looked out at the debris field, at the ruins of an empire's fleet. Because this battle was not about defeating the Dominion. 3,000 ships is nothing compared to their full strength. We have not won a war today, we have won a message. She turned to face her crew. And now we need to deliver that message to the galaxy. Lord Or would not accept defeat. His flagship, the Eternal Throne, was crippled. Most of his crew was dead. His weapons barely functioned. His engines could only manage 1/3 power. But he was still alive, and the Dominion did not surrender. The Dominion had never surrendered in 10,000 years. He would not be the first. "Find me the human command ship," he ordered the few officers still alive on his bridge. "We will ram them if we must. We will take their leader with us into death." His remaining sensors searched the battlefield. Through the smoke and debris, they found what looked like a large human vessel. It was not moving. It was not firing. It sat in the center of the destruction like a queen watching her army work. "There," Or pointed. "That is their command ship. Set course, all power to engines." The Eternal Throne began to move. It was slow and painful, like a wounded animal dragging itself toward its killer. Human ships watched it pass but did not fire. They simply moved aside, creating a path through the debris. N, still floating in his escape pod nearby, watched his former flagship limp toward its final destination. He should have felt pride. He should have admired Lord Or's courage. Instead, he felt only sadness. The humans were letting them through. They wanted this to happen. It took 2 hours for the Eternal Throne to reach its target. Or stood at the viewport the entire time, watching the human vessel grow larger. It was big, he realized, bigger than he had first thought. But it was not shaped like a warship. It was shaped like something else. A station, a broadcast station. "Supreme Commander," one of his officers whispered. "That is not a command ship. It has no weapons, no armor. It is a communications platform." Or felt ice spread through his body. Then where is their commander? A screen flickered to life without anyone touching it. Admiral's face appeared. She looked tired but calm. Behind her, Or could see the bridge of a warship, officers working at stations, screens showing tactical data. "Lord Or," she said, "I am Admiral of the United Terran Defense Fleet. I am speaking to you from the Resolute, which is currently positioned 3,000 kilometers behind your ship. You have been chasing a recording station." Or's hands curled into fists. "You trick us even now, you have no honor." "Honor is a luxury for those who can afford it. We could not afford it, so we learned to win without it." "What do you want?" If you mean to execute me, do it. I will not beg. Shook her head. I do not want to execute you, Lord, or I want you to watch. The screen split. Half showed's face. The other half showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of dots representing worlds under Dominion control. Occupied worlds, enslaved species, 10,000 years of conquest displayed in lights and colors. This station you have been chasing is called Prometheus, explained. It has one purpose. It is the most powerful broadcasting system ever built. In approximately 30 seconds, it will transmit a message to every planet in Dominion space. Or felt his heart stop. What message? This one. The screen changed to show the battle. Every moment recorded from dozens of angles, ships exploding, soldiers dying, weapons failing. 3,000 warships of the mighty Dominion reduced to debris by a species they had dismissed as cowards. This footage will reach 47 enslaved worlds simultaneously, said. Every species you have conquered, every race you have dominated, every slave who has never seen their masters bleed. They will all see this. They will all see the Dominion die. Or staggered backward, he understood now. The battle had never been about defeating his fleet. His fleet was tiny compared to the Dominion's full power. This was about something much bigger. This was about destroying an idea. For 10,000 years, the Dominion had been invincible. Every species knew it. Every slave believed it. The Dominion could not be defeated. The Dominion could not be challenged. Resistance was not just futile. It was unthinkable. And now, every enslaved being in the galaxy was about to watch the unthinkable happen. You cannot do this, Or whispered. If the slaves see this, they will rebel, they will rise up, there will be chaos, billions will die. Yes, said simply. Billions will die fighting for their freedom. Is that not better than trillions living in slavery? You do not understand what you are unleashing. We understand perfectly. We are not just fighting a war, Lord, or we are starting a revolution. The broadcast began. Across the galaxy, screens flickered to life on 1,000 worlds. In slave camps on frozen moons. In factories on poisoned planets. In cities where conquered species had lived under Dominion rule for centuries. Everywhere at the same moment, the message arrived. On a mining world called, an old creature named stopped his work and looked up at the screen mounted on the wall. He was one of the first species the Dominion had conquered. His people had been slaves for 8,000 years. They had forgotten what freedom felt like. But now he watched ships burning. He watched Dominion soldiers dying. He watched the impossible happening right before his eyes. They can bleed, he whispered. The masters can bleed. Around him, other slaves stopped their work. They gathered before the screen. They watched in silence as humans, a species most of them had never heard of, did what no one had ever done before. The footage showed Lord Or's flagship being captured. It showed commanders surrendering. It showed the proud, invincible Dominion brought to its knees by 800 ships and 40 years of planning. At the end of the broadcast, Admiral appeared one final time. To all species living under Dominion rule, she said, my name is Admiral, I am human. What you have just seen is real. The Dominion is not invincible. They can be fought. They can be defeated. They can die just like anyone else. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was hard and certain. We cannot free you. We are too far away, too few, too weak. But we have shown you that freedom is possible. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. Fight or submit. Die on your feet or live on your knees. The choice is yours. It has always been yours. The broadcast ended. Silence spread across 1,000 worlds. Then slowly something began to change. Old picked up his mining tool and looked at it differently, not as a tool for work, as a tool for something else. On a dozen other worlds, similar moments happened. Slaves who had never dreamed of resistance began to dream. Weapons that had been hidden for generations were brought out of hiding. Messages were sent through secret channels that the Dominion had never discovered. The revolution had begun. On the eternal throne, Lord Or watched the broadcast end and felt his world crumbling. Everything he had built, everything his species had built for 10,000 years was about to burn. What have you done? He asked, his voice hollow. What was necessary? She replied. You asked us to surrender. You asked us to become slaves. This is our answer. We would rather burn your empire to the ground than kneel before it. Billions will die. Billions were already dying. They were just dying slowly in chains without hope. Now they will die quickly fighting for something that matters. You gave them slavery. We gave them a choice." Or had no response. He stood in the ruins of his flagship, watching the galaxy catch fire around him. The humans had not just defeated his fleet. They had broken the Dominion's greatest weapon, the belief that resistance was impossible, the certainty that the Masters would always win. That certainty was gone now, and without it the Dominion was just another empire waiting to fall. 6 months changed everything. The Dominion did not collapse immediately. Empires rarely do. They had ruled for 10,000 years, and that kind of power does not disappear overnight, but the cracks spread faster than anyone expected. Within the first month, 18 enslaved species launched rebellions. Some failed quickly, crushed by Dominion forces that still outnumbered them, but some succeeded. The of, led by Old and his mining tools, captured their planet in 3 weeks. The of the outer colonies overwhelmed their guards through sheer numbers. The telepathics simply walked out of their labor camps while their masters stood frozen, unable to move or think. By the 3rd month, the Dominion was fighting on 40 different fronts. Ships that had been conquering new territories were called back to defend old ones. Resources meant for expansion were spent on survival. The unstoppable machine of empire began to grind and slow. And in the middle of it all, humanity watched and waited. Admiral returned to human space as a hero. Crowds gathered wherever she went. Politicians wanted to give her medals. Children wore shirts with her face on them, but she took no pleasure in the celebration. "We won a battle," she told her officers. "One battle. The Dominion still has 10 times our military strength. If we become arrogant, if we overreach, we will still lose." Not everyone agreed with her caution. Some human leaders wanted to press the advantage. They had tasted victory and they wanted more. "We should strike now," General argued at a war council. "While they are weak, while they are distracted, we could take a dozen worlds before they organize a response." Shook her head. "And become what? Conquerors, occupiers? We defeated the Dominion by being patient, by being clever, by making them underestimate us. The moment we start acting like them, we lose everything that made us dangerous." "Then what do you suggest? We simply wait while others fight and die." "I suggest we remember why we won. We won because we fought defensively. We won because we chose our battlefield. We won because we refused to play their game." She stood and looked out the window at the stars. "If we become conquerors, we become just another empire, and empires always fall. I would rather humanity remain something different, something that cannot be conquered because it refuses to be an empire at all." The debate continued for weeks. In the end, humanity chose a middle path. They would not conquer, but they would not hide either. They would help the rebellion where they could. They would offer sanctuary to those who escaped Dominion space. They would be a symbol of what was possible, not a new master to replace the old. On the other side of the galaxy, N made his own choice. He had survived the battle in his escape pod. A human rescue ship had found him drifting in the debris and brought him aboard. He expected torture. He expected execution. Instead, he received medical care, food, and a small room to recover in. The humans treated him like a prisoner of war, not like an animal. It was confusing. When he was healthy enough to talk, a human officer came to interview him. She was small and gray-haired, with eyes that seemed to see everything. "I am Admiral," she said. "You are N. You tried to warn Lord or about our trap." N nodded slowly. He did not listen. No, he could not listen. 10,000 years of victory had made him incapable of imagining defeat. That was not his fault, really. It was the fault of his entire civilization. And now that civilization is burning. "Yes, what do you think about that?" N considered the question carefully. A month ago, he would have said it was a tragedy. He would have said the Dominion was righteous, and the slaves were inferior beings who needed guidance. That was what he had been taught from birth. But he had watched his fleet die around him. He had seen the impossible happen. And in the weeks since, floating in a human medical bay, he had started to think about things he had never thought about before. "I think," he said slowly, "that the Dominion deserved to fall, not because we were evil. Many of my people believed we were doing good. We thought we were bringing order to chaos, civilization to savages. But we never asked the savages what they wanted. We never considered that they might have civilizations of their own. We saw them as problems to be solved, not as people to be understood. And that blindness is what killed us." nodded. What will you do now? I do not know. I cannot go home. My people would see me as a traitor, but I do not wish to fight against them either. They are still my people, even if I no longer believe in their cause. There is another option. You could help us understand them. Help us find ways to end this war without more slaughter than necessary. In met her eyes. Why would you trust me? I am your enemy. You are my enemy. Now you are a person who sees the truth. That makes you more valuable than 1,000 soldiers. 3 months later, a summit was called. Representatives from 23 newly freed species gathered on a neutral space station to discuss the future. Humans were invited as honored guests. The meeting was chaotic. Species that had been slaves for centuries did not know how to govern themselves. Old hatreds suppressed by Dominion rule began to surface. Arguments broke out. Fights nearly started. But slowly, painfully, progress was made. A council was formed. Agreements were reached. The beginnings of a new order started to take shape. On the final day of the summit, Admiral was asked to address the assembly. She stood before beings of 100 different shapes and sizes, creatures who had never known freedom, and spoke simply. Many of you have asked what humans are. Some call us heroes, some call us liberators, some call us tricksters who fight without honor. She paused and looked around the room. We are none of those things. We are simply survivors. Our species evolved on a dangerous world, surrounded by predators larger and stronger than ourselves. We could not outrun them. We could not outfight them. So we learned to outthink them. We learned patience. We learned to plan. We learned that the most dangerous creature is not the one with the biggest teeth, but the one willing to wait for the right moment. She thought of the Obsidian Nebula, 40 years of preparation for one battle. The Dominion looked at us and saw prey. They saw small, weak creatures that would be easy to conquer. They never wondered why such weak creatures had survived so long on such a dangerous world. They never asked what kind of predator evolves by appearing harmless. The assembly was silent. You are all free now. What you do with that freedom is your choice. But I will offer one piece of advice. Do not become the Dominion. Do not let power make you blind. Remember what it felt like to be powerless and use that memory to guide how you treat others. She stepped back from the podium. We did not win because we were stronger. We won because we refused to believe we had already lost. Remember that. It is the most dangerous thing about humans. Far away in a prison cell, Lord or sat alone. He would face trial soon for 10,000 years of atrocities committed by his people. He would likely be executed. He had accepted this. But one question still haunted him. A human guard stood outside his cell, a small creature barely reaching his chest. One day, or finally asked the question that had tormented him since the battle. How did you do it? How did you hide so much for so long? 40 years of preparation right under our noses, and we never saw it. The guard shrugged. It was a strange gesture, very human. You looked at us and saw prey. You never thought to wonder what kind of predator hunts by looking like prey. Or stared at the guard for a long moment, and finally, at the end of everything, he understood. Humans had not fled at the frontier. They had not retreated in fear. They had not broken without battle. They had lured. And the greatest empire in galactic history had walked straight into the trap, never suspecting that the frightened little creatures they were chasing had been hunting them all along. The guard walked away, or sat in his cell and thought about predators that looked like prey. He thought about it for a very long time.